Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Radha Govardhan ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing with the reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Creation of the Kumaras and Others, and today's verse is number 35, and we finished with Lord Brahma, the saga of Lord Brahma chasing his daughter and giving up his body as a consequence. So now we're going to another lila or activity of Lord Brahma. Chatur hotram karmatna tantram upaveda nayaksaha dharmasya padas chatvaras tateva shrama vrittaya chaturhotram karmatantram upaveda nayaksaha dharmasya padas chatvaras tatevam shrama vrittaya. Upaveda nayaksaha dharmasya padas chatvaras tateva shrama vrittaya. Vaishnavis? Chaturpotram karmatantram upaveda nayaksaha dharmasya padaschatvaras tateva shrama vrittaya. Chaturhotram karmatantram upaveda nayaksaha dharmasya padaschatvaras tateva shrama vrittaya. Chatuhu, 4. Hotram, paraphernalia for sacrifice. Karma, action. Tantram, expansions of such activities. Upaveda, supplementary to the Vedas. Naya, by logical conclusions. Saha, along with. Dharmasya, of religiosity. Padaha, principles. Chatvaraha, 4. Tatha eva, in the same way. Ashrama, social orders. Vrittayaha, occupations. Srila Prabhupada's translation for this verse. The 4 kinds of paraphernalia for conducting the fire sacrifices became manifest. The performer, or the chanter, the offerer, the fire, and the action performed in terms of the supplementary Vedas. Also, the four principles of religiosity, truth, austerity, mercy, and cleanliness, and the duties in the four social orders all became manifest. Please repeat. The four kinds of paraphernalia for conducting the fire sacrifice became manifest. The performer, the offerer, the fire, and the action performed in terms of the supplementary Vedas. Also, the four principles of religiosity and the duties in the four social orders all became manifest. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Eating, sleeping, defending, and mating are the four principles of material bodily demands, which are common to both the animals and human society. To distinguish human society from the animals, there is the performance of religious activities in terms of the social statuses and orders of life. They are all clearly mentioned in the Vedic literatures and were manifested by Brahma when the four Vedas were generated from his four mouths. Thus, the duties of humankind in terms of the statuses and social orders were established to be observed by the civilized man. Those who traditionally follow these principles are called Aryans, or progressive human beings. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Chalakaya Chakshuramitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual masters opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him. Namaham Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. I remember when I first started coming to ISKCON, I was made to listen songs by the band, the hardcore, straight edge Vaishnava band of the 90s, Shelter. Most of you here may have listened to them or heard of them. And I remember there was this one song called Civilized Man. And I remember we'd be going, and traveling Sankirtan to distribute Prabhupada's books at some concert, and we'd have that album blaring and the chorus blaring, I tried the best I can. I tried to understand civilized man, so-called civilized man. We'd be like, so-called, so-called. Growing up as a non-devotee, even though I had a few drops of Catholicism sprinkled on me, I never heard that, your life, the goal of your life is to distinguish yourself from animals. The goal of your life is self-realization. I used to listen to Supertramp and other classic bands from the 70s. And there's this one song, the Logical song, where the singer goes, there are times when all the world's asleep. The questions run too deep for such a simple man. Won't you please tell me what we've learned? I know it sounds absurd. Please tell me who I am. But except for singing that song a couple of times, and perhaps once, while I was stoned with some friends, perhaps asking, well, wait a second, what's life all about? No one taught me that, aside from a few moral lessons, again, coming from the Christian tradition, and maybe if I had dived into it more, I would have heard notions that actually the form of life of human life is really important. But this term atato brahma jigyasa, which is kind of the essence of Prabhupada's purport, I only heard when I came to Krishna consciousness, and I think most of us can relate to that, whether we were born in the movement and there was a moment where we were like, okay, you know what, I'm going to take this Krishna consciousness seriously. or those of us who were not born in the movement and who maybe came from other religious traditions who maybe not have stressed that point so vividly, we got to a point where we realized, wait a second, and aside from, not opposed to, but aside from or parallel with my duties, my responsibilities, my services, my life, my career, my so-and-so, I have a responsibility of self-realization. And that responsibility, that duty is really the key, the most important thing, right? And therefore the Vedanta Sutra starts with this aphorism, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, that we all know. Atato meaning now that, and so, the commentator says, now what? Like, how do you start a book with the word therefore, or now that? So it's assumed that the belief in reincarnation is assumed, and now that you have a human body, that you've incarnated into a human form of life, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now is the duty to inquire into the absolute truth with the faith that, as we hear in this verse, Krishna or God has arranged everything for the maintenance of man, as well as to give him and her, obviously, an opportunity for self-realization. Right? Sanatana Goswami, when he met Lord Chaitanya, that he mentioned that famous question, right? Kyami. We believe he was obviously doing this as a lila. He's a self-realized eternal associate of the Lord. But for our sake, he asks this question, Kyami, right? Who am I, right? And here, the text, the Bhagavatam tells us that Brahma created the whole material world. So we are creationists, we're Vedic creationists. In the debate on origins, and there's a strong Christian creationist movement out there, and congratulations to them, because they're very good at least defeating Darwinian assumptions and evolution assumptions, which we don't really. We may ascribe to intelligent design, but it's a design that's intelligent with ultimately a supreme Lord that's creating it via the demiurge of the universe, Lord Brahma, who creates all these, who creates everything, right? Who creates the 4 yugas that we live in, much longer periods than the 6,000-year literal interpretation of the Bible. Here we're talking, million. How long does this universe last? And this is like the smallest universe, right? 311 trillion years, right? And these 4 yugas that keep repeating each other. One of my favorite Prabhupada stories when he was in Laguna Beach. It's in those Prabhupada memories, anecdotes. So assuming it's true, which I'm sure it was, or I believe it was, Prabhupada was seen to be laughing or smiling during a kirtan. And then, according to the story, devotees asked him afterwards, like, Prabhupada, why were you laughing during the kirtan? Do devotees know this story? And, right, so correct me if I'm wrong, Prabhupada, but Prabhupada said, well, didn't you see there was Lord Shiva, there was Brahma, there was Narada Muni, and these great personalities from the Bhagavatam, and according to the story, Prabhupada was actually hanging out with them, laughing, and then he said we were laughing because we were all agreeing just how much you all are such Kali Yuga devotees. You are such Kali Yuga devotees. Now we shouldn't be depressed by that. It's actually kind of it brings us back down to reality, and it's kind of comical. Sometimes we tend to think we're so great. At least speaking for myself, I'm so special, I'm so advanced, I understand so well compared to other. No, you're just you're just a regular Kali Yuga conditioned soul. Okay. And Brahma creates the Varnashram. He talks about here about the 4 Varnas, the 4 ashrams, the 4 social orders, the 4 statuses of life. And the most important factor, Brahma creates yajna. Krishna creates yajna, but via Brahma, this notion of sacrifice. And I think we should focus on this briefly, because that's kind of the gist of it. And the gist of it being, which kind of yajna that concerns us specifically? Sankirtan yajna, exactly. In the Bhagavad Gita 3:9 to 16, this will be a refresher for 99% of the devotees, but the process of yagya, or sacrifice, is clearly described by Krishna, starting at verse 9 of chapter 3. So let me read a few verses for y'all. Work has to be performed as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain free from bondage. So this whole world is bondage, except for work done as sacrifice. And so therefore devotees of Krishna chant Hare Krishna because they believe that chanting Hare Krishna is this sacrifice that is meant to please God and that has no karmic reactions to it. On the contrary, it purifies, all sorts of sins performed in the past. And therefore they also eat food offered in sacrifice. The notion of prasadam being so important. Those who eat food that had been offered in sacrifice are purified of all sins, but those who eat food or who cook only for themselves verily eat only sin. Right? And speaking of himself in the third person, Krishna says, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yagya, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation." The demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you, and thus, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. A little bit later in chapter 16, verse 16, Krishna talks about pravartitam chakram, how a wheel has been made to turn, a cycle has been made to turn. And that's the cycle that we're talking about. You serve, here even Krishna is including the demigods, the goddesses and gods of the universe, but in the strict monotheistic sense of Krishna Bhakti, Vishnu Bhakti, the sacrifice is obviously to the root, which is Krishna. But the principle of pleasing God and therefore God being pleased with us in return and bestowing all sorts of blessings upon man is upheld, the same principle, including grains, including food, including clothing. I was just listening to a lecture of Prabhupada this morning as I was brushing my teeth, and Prabhupada says, in Kali Yuga, we're performing less and less yagya. In Kali Yuga, people don't perform yagya. On the contrary, they perform all sorts of very horrible activities. Just go to a slaughterhouse and see, right? Such a shame that our fellow Christians, most of them don't get that point. And it seems like Prabhupada really stressed that. Like that was the one thing that came up again and again, they just stopped eating meat. And therefore, less grains will be there. Now we have enough money and grains are not so expensive, but as time goes on, the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, right, gives us all these predictions of what it's going to be like at the end of Kali Yuga. Why? Because we're not, because according to Shastra, people are not performing yagya. They're not performing yagya. They're putting a stick in the wheel. When the thing comes down to us, I'll keep it for myself. I'm not going to re-offer it to Krishna. Speaking of rains, here's the next verses. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yagya, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods, in return, is certainly a thief. And then there's 2 verses about, again, eating food offered to Krishna or to God. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prefer food for their personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So even if you're, living in a busy urban context and you're working and you have to, in your mind, you can still offer your salad and your pizza that you bought at the local restaurant to Krishna. As a matter of fact, I like this anecdote. What's a sannyasi who was in Vrindavan, kind of the right-hand man of Radhanath Swami, who travels a lot now? He has a few disciples. No, Prabhupada disciple. So less famous, personality in Vrindavan. I forget his name. Anyway, he was. Yes, Chandrasekar Maharaj. So yeah, I remember we're driving in a car, and he mentioned this. I think this really nice story. How he was driving in London with some devotees, and one of them told him, a young businessman, like, Maharaj, I was at a business meeting recently, and we all went to this restaurant, and they were all eating meat around me, and I ordered some non-vegetarian, I ordered some vegetarian food, and I in my mind I prayed to Krishna, I'm really sorry, there's all this meat around, and please accept this offering. And then Chandrasekar Maharaj told him, well, maybe that was the best offering you ever made in your life. Krishna is bhavagrahi Janardana, the motivation, the heart with which an offering is made is what Krishna really sees, right? More than the outside paraphernalia. So. But again, the principle of offering in sacrifice one's food, that's the main theme, right? If one offers me with love and devotion, a fruit, a flower, or water, I will accept it, Krishna says, right? And so finally, the last two verses. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, this is an important sentence, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. And therefore this wheel, my dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain, right? To quote a famous Vedic sage, Bob Marley, I'm just kidding, but he does say one nice thing in one of his songs, live for yourself and you will live in vain, live for others and you will live again. And living for others in the Vaishnava sense means living for the sake of helping other souls, come closer and closer to Krishna. And engaging in Sankirtan Yagya. Sankirtan Yagya. The Yagya for this age of Kali. Kaler dosha nidera jan astyeko mahadguna kirtanad eva krishnasya mukta sangha param rajet. My dear king, in this age is an ocean of faults, right? Nidhe. But there's one good quality, one redeeming quality by performance of Sankirtan Yagya. One is promoted, one is freed from material bondage, and one is promoted to the transcendental kingdom. And what's that other verse? Yagyai Sankirtana Prayar Yajantihi Sumidasaha. What are the first two lines? Krishna Varnam Tusha Krishna Sango Pangastra Parshadam Yagyai Sankirtana Prayar Yajantihi Sumidasaha. In Kali Yuga, those who are intelligent, who have a little bit of brain, they'll perform the Sankirtan Yagya. They'll perform the congregational chanting of God's holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And the word Samyak, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained, Sankirtan comes from the root Samyak. If I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but that's what I basically understood. The word Samyak means complete Sankirtan. And therefore the notion of Yukta Vairagya comes into play. And therefore Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used, printing presses to print books en masse, right? And we don't stop. We continue to do Yukta Vairagya with YouTubers who have, like wisdom of the sages and electricity and AI and God knows what more we will be able to use. Local culture, local sartorial culture, local food culture, etc., etc., etc. Engage in the service of the Lord in spreading the glories of Krishna, in spreading the holy name, so that a larger number of people can join together and glorify Krishna. The activity of spreading the glories of Krishna and the activities of glorifying Krishna are both considered Sankirtan, right? And if you've read the book that came out recently by Tamal Krishna Maharaj's brother on Ayendra Prabhu, I think called Kirtan Revolution, a big, fat, thick green book, the biography of Ayendra. Anyone's read it? Everyone's seen it? Yeah. It's a great book to read. I have some humble suggestion, especially in terms of this theme of, Sankirtan Yagya, stressing how important it is to do what devotees are doing in the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, chanting Hare Krishna. I think there's a t-shirt now that says, chanting Hare Krishna is our business, or this is what we do, right? A famous statement by Prabhupada, this is what we do, and it is. As a tiny little parenthesis, here in the verse, the word Upaveda is mentioned, which means secondary, or how does Prabhupada translate it? Upaveda, supplementary to the Vedas. So we think of like Jyotish, astrology, the science of, the Vedic science of astrology. We think of Ayurveda, the medical branch of the Vedas. We think of Vastu, which here is quite popular in New Govardhana, and I think that's great. What's his name? Shastra Prabhu is like a Vastu expert, and apparently, when the Prabhus built this wall here, things started improving in New Govardhana. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it was a coincidence by the sudden increase of purity and spiritual fervor and bhakti, and at the same time a wall was built. But it seems like we see empirically how these Upavedic sciences have benefit for society, and they're there. And so on the one hand, we can and should, as Bhakti Tirtha Swami, those of you who remember Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he used to say to engage the secondary in the service of the primary. To engage the secondary in the service of the primary. And therefore you have, like, I don't want to put him on the spot, but for example, your resident Nimai, or Nishingapali Prabhu, the son of Pragosh, the Hedemark family. He's studying astrology and wants kind of to shift from the work that he's doing now, which is a little physically tiring, to becoming an astrologer, and he wants to use that obviously to also bring people closer to Krishna. Shastra was telling me that when he was doing seminars on Vastu, he had to order full sets of the Bhagavatam from the BBT, like regularly, because people were like, he was connecting the dots, like the whole big picture of Vastu Kalyana, and ultimately, surprise, surprise, Krishna, right? Same thing with Ayurveda. So they're definitely, if just as we can engage electricity in Krishna service, the Vaishnavas can and do engage, psychology, all sorts of topics, all sorts of things in the mission of Lord Chaitanya. But by the same token, though, we have to remember what we're really about. Sometimes devotees get a little bahushaka in terms of what we're really about, and may, advertise or emphasize things which could be very clearly seen as upaveda, or secondary, and not essential to, the Sankirtan Yagya of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's a small little parenthesis I wanted to make. The thrust, we should remain on target. What's the actual thrust of the parampara coming from Lord Chaitanya? Not that I assume I know it. I mean, I believe I do, and that's my arrogance, but I think we can speak in general terms that, we have to be careful to remain on track. I mean, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself said, if you take all the Vedic literatures, you burn them, and if the Srimad Bhagavatam remained, what did he say? Nothing would be lost. Nothing would be lost if only the Bhagavatam remained, right? And remember, in the Bhagavatam, in the first canto, there's that famous verse, Atak pumbir dvija shreshta varnashrama vibhagasha shvanustitasya dharmasya samsitim hari toshanam. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is haritoshanam, to please Krishna. to please Krishna. So pleasing Krishna is ultimately, is always the ultimate consideration in the bhakti tradition. So, what can I tell you, Prabhu? There's many senior devotees to me here. You're extremely fortunate to be performing the Yuga Dharma, and you're like, no, duh. But yeah, you are. At least if these scriptures say the truth, then you are. And you're showing the example to the world of how human life is meant for self-realization, right? Regardless of where you are, whether you're a monk or whether you're living as a householder, or it doesn't. You are showing the example here of how human life is meant to be lived, right? And if you have, accidental fall downs, if you fall occasionally from the highest standard of sadhana, just, pick yourself up and put your hand back in that japa bag and continue chanting, Hare Krishna. And at the same time, be careful with what you ingurgitate. Be careful with how much social media, for example, these things are so addictive, and what kind of, stuff you soak in through the internet, and do your best to follow the 4 regulative principles, because that, keeps you safe and closer, or at least it facilitates you performing the Yuga Dharma, and it facilitates you getting that higher taste from Krishna, that param drishtva, right? And, you can also just, not that you need reminding, but you can remember that, Krishna made this really nice arrangement for you to become part of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, for you to chant Hare Krishna on a daily basis, and you should be, convinced that somehow or other you're doing the right thing, and just, keep going. Jai, before a few concluding words, anyone would like to correct me or ask some questions? What's the borderline or the distinction between, not to be too attached or not attached enough to offer the secondary in the service of the primary?
Yes. It's because sometimes I have the experience, that sometimes we can become bewildered or attached to, like Krishna said, the flourish words of the Vedas, and also the different aspects of the Vedas, the Ayurveda, the astrology, like you mentioned before. And we forget, slowly we forget about the primary, which is Krishna. So how can we gauge this in order not to get too diverted? Yeah.
I think if our sadhana starts going down, then we have a problem, perhaps. If we stop chanting our 16 rounds or however rounds we kind of have a sadhana to chant on a daily basis, or if we, start messing up on the 4 regulative principles, and then maybe it's a sign that we have to get back on track. I think your question, if I may, is similar to the one that Shruta Kirti Prabhu asked Prabhupada in that book, What is the Difficulty, when he recounts his travels with Prabhupada, and he asked Prabhupada this question, Prabhupada, how do we distinguish between principles and details? That's kind of the same question, right? Primary being the principles, secondary being details, and there's a debate. And I think there always will be a debate between different devotees coming from different backgrounds or who have different views, on what constitutes a detail, what constitutes a principle. And Prabhupada's answer in this particular anecdote was kind of like ultra deep and sublime, and at the same time kind of left you hungry, at least in my case, right? He answered, that takes a little intelligence. No, that takes a little Krishna consciousness. Either it takes intelligence or it takes Krishna consciousness. The answer to the question, how do you distinguish between principles and details, that takes some Krishna consciousness, or that takes some intelligence. You'd wish Prabhupada would have said, okay, can you, you wish we could have asked, well, can you expand on that? But in a way, it's very sublime, because Krishna does give us intelligence. Tesham satati yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam. Right? To those who are constantly devoted and serve me with love, I give them the intelligence So we shouldn't underestimate, however fallen we are, that Krishna does guide us, does give us guidance, does help us make, do the right thing, as Spike Lee used to say, right? So Krishna's help is a very important factor.
Thank you so much, bro. So when we talk about details, because I heard that someone asked Srila Prabhupada what means love and devotion, because Krishna say, if someone offer me with love and devotion, so one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, what is the meaning of love and devotion? And Srila Prabhupada said, attention to detail. So in that sense, details are okay. But what do you mean when you say details? Details of I really don't understand when you say details are not so important as the primary, which is Krishna. So I really don't understand that part. Yeah.
Maybe you want to answer this question?
There's an interesting discussion. I think it's the second chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. And Rupa Goswami is pointing out that he's discussing principles and details. He says the principles will remain the same, always from one spiritual master, acharya, whatever, to the other. The details will vary. So in order to understand the details in our application of Krishna consciousness, we have to go to the instructions of our founder, acharya. And he explains to us how to apply Krishna consciousness according to time, place, and circumstance. And you'll see, like Prabhupada's books, his lectures, his writings are full of instructions on how to apply. And even he explained to Brahmananda at one point that the first few years he was in America, he was just studying the American psyche to see what would be the best way to apply Krishna consciousness. And then we see how Prabhupada founded ISKCON, and then in the early 70s in Los Angeles, he established the morning program. He spent time there, and he invited the temple presidents to come from all over the world to see how he had applied Krishna consciousness. So we understand it through the acharya. That's how we understand the details. And you see, each acharya is going to have a different focus.
The analogy, following Prabhu's wise words, the analogy of load-bearing walls in a building. So there's some walls in a building that you just can't touch, because if you break them, the whole thing collapses. So at least obvious principles, at least to me, and I think everyone will agree, is, for example, the four regulative principles. You mess around with that, the whole thing falls apart. As a matter of fact, Bhakti Churma, when I was traveling with him often, would quote, I never read it, like in Prabhupada's actually in the Veda base, but he probably heard Prabhupada say, if I just required 3 principles, I would have millions of followers, right? Like, what's the joke? This is a joke for, the joke, the stereotype of the second generation devotee who, is not serious about his or her sadhana. But it's said with love, what are the 4 regulative principles for second generation kids? No meat, fish, or eggs, and no gambling. Not funny? Okay, we got a smile from a Gurukuli, so that's good. But yeah, so if you stop one of the principles, then, or 2, you get more followers, but the whole thing collapses. And similarly, for example, if we stop, like Prabhu said, if we don't focus on Prabhupada's, foundational teachings, and of course the authority ultimately, the buck doesn't stop at Prabhupada, the buck stops at the Bhagavatam, So if we disregard the Shastra and Prabhupada's take on the Shastra, then the whole structure collapses. So those are load-bearing walls. But there are other walls in a building or in a room that you can, hey, let's expand the room this way. We can break this wall. And we see, acharyas, and acharyas with big A's, and micro acharyas also, like the leader of a yatra, or the leader of a preaching center in Zimbabwe, or will make and have always, not just in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in every single theistic tradition that has a preaching spirit and has done missionary work outside of the original cultural context where the tradition was manifest or sprang, there's always been adjustments that were made. But specifically, that's the big question. What is a detail? What is a? But some, I think, are undeniably self-evident. And we can build on that. Yeah, it's exactly foundation. So, Prabhus, thank you very much. We're grateful to be in Krishna consciousness. We're lucky to be engaged in the Yuga Dharma, and we should just continue with our chanting and with our performance of the Yuga Dharma. It's late. I don't want to. Okay, Prabhus, can you indulge this Vaishnavi? She's insisting to ask a question. So, please. Perhaps you have to switch it on if it's working.
My question is, Prabhuji, I'm only a sadhaka, very neophyte. So, regarding it's easy to slip into social media other than Krishna conscious sometimes. So, how can we remain constantly in Krishna consciousness, or use the same time for reading scriptures? How can we develop that taste? Which means full surrender to Krishna, which is constantly. Can you please guide me, Prabhuji?
Well, you're asking someone who doesn't have much taste at all, so that's why I use an app called Freedom.2, and I was going to make a joke that I got paid to make this advertisement, but no, it's called Freedom.2, and it's an app that actually, like this morning I forgot I had to send a message to a business partner for a deadline, but I couldn't. Why? Because I had put this session on my phone to block all social media until 9 a.m. So that in the morning when I wake up, I have no other choice but to, focus on Krishna. So that's one thing devotees can and should do, If you can't do it yourself, and these things are super addictive, they make them as such. One of the founders of Facebook specifically said, I forbid my children from having a Facebook account, right? And same thing goes with TikTok and Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. So they're made to be ultra addictive. And yes, okay, I'm just going to post Krishna conscious content, and I'm just going to read Krishna conscious content. That sounds great, but it usually doesn't happen. So depending on the individual, sometimes God helps those who help themselves. Some devotees have addictions of various types. So on top of their sadhana, they may be part of some 12-step program to reinforce. So God helps those who help themselves. So if not you specifically, but if anyone's having any sadhaka, like all of us are mostly, have difficulty with social media, then perhaps having an app such as, or locking the phone in the car far away from your house, so you don't have to, we have to do the needful, as Prabhupada said, do the needful. And if we do that, if we use our intelligence in Krishna's service to do the needful, so that we can somehow stay afloat on this beautiful boat of the Sankirtan movement, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, then we can all go back home, back to Godhead, and help others to do the same. Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Boo.
that mantra, Nishinga mantra. There Pralaya Payadhi Jale Dhitavanasi Vedam. This is a song sung by great Vaishnava poet Jayadev Goswami. The purport is that when there was devastation, the whole universe was flooded with water. The ultimate dissolution of this material world will be, first of all, there will be no water. All water on the earth will be dried up by scorching heat of the sun. The sun will become 12 times stronger as it is at the present moment. In that way, evaporate all the waters, the seas and the oceans will be all evaporated. Therefore, all living creatures on the earth will die. And then, due to scorching heat, practically everything will be turned into ashes. Then there will be rain for 100 years, torrents of rain, like the trunk of the elephant. And thus the whole universe will be filled with water. That is called pralaya payadhi. At the time of devastation, pralaya, the whole universe will be just like it is now filled with air. At that time it will be filled up with water. At that time, Vedas will be said by the Lord on a boat, and the boat will be stuck up in the wings of the great fish. That great fish is the incarnation of Krishna. Therefore he is worshipping Kesavadhita Meena Sarira Jaya Jagadish. Meena Sarira. And the next is Khitiriha Vipulatare Tisthati Tava Pristhe Dharani Dharanakina Chakra Girish. So there will be churning. Next incarnation is tortoise. On the back of the tortoise, the Meru Parvat will be fixed up, or the world will rest on the back of the tortoise. This is second incarnation. First fish, and then tortoise. Then Varaha avatar, one demon, Hiranya Kashipu and Hiranyaka. So he will, by his demonic activities, he will throw the earth on the Garbho sea. There is a sea within this universe. Half of the globe is filled up with Garbha Samudra, on which Garbhodsai Vishnu is there, and from him a lotus stem comes out, wherein Brahma takes birth. So all the planets are hanging as different stems of this original stem coming out from the abdomen of Garbhodosai Vishnu. So one demon of the name Hiranyaka, he will put this earth within this water, and at that time the Lord will come out in the incarnation of Varaha. The Varaha incarnation came as a small insect from the nose of Brahma, and when he put it on his hand, it began to increase. In this way, he assumed a very gigantic body, and with his tusk, he picked up the earth from within the water of Garbho ocean. That is called Kesavadhita Varaharu. The next is Tavakara Kamala Bari Nakamadhuta Singham Dolita Hiranya Kashipu Tanu Bhenga. Hiranyakashipu, he was another demon who wanted to be immortal. So he took benediction from Brahma that he will not die on land, in the sky, or in the water. So in order to keep as it is, the benediction given by Brahma, Lord Krishna tries to honor the words of his devotee. So Brahma gave him benediction, yes, he will not die on land, on water, in sky. But Nishingadev appeared as half lion, half man, because Hiranyakashipu also took benediction from Brahma that he will not be killed by any man or any animal. So he assumed the form of something which you cannot say a man or animal, and he put the demon on his lap, which is neither land, water or sky. And he wanted to not to be killed by any weapons. Therefore, the Lord killed him with his nails. Nail is not considered as weapon. In this way, he wanted to cheat Brahma, but the Lord is so intelligent that he cheated Hiranyakashipu and killed him. Keshavadhita narahaviru dolita Hiranyakashipu tanu bhingma. It's like with our nails, we can kill any insect. Take an ant, you can bifurcate it. Similarly, the Hiranyakashipu is such a giant demon. He was compared just like a little insect and was killed by the nails of the Lord. Then, next incarnation is Bamandev. This Bamandev, a dwarf, he went to Balu Maharaj and asked him 3 feet land. And his guru, Shankaracharya, induced him not to promise because he is Vishnu. But Bali Maharaj was very much satisfied to offer something to Vishnu. He gave up the connection of his guru because he forbade him to serve Vishnu. Therefore Bali Maharaj is one of the Mahaja. Nobody can check the worship of Vishnu. If anyone checks, he may be guru, he may be father, he may be relative, he should be rejected immediately. Therefore Bali Maharaj is a Mahaja. He showed this example because his guru put hindrances on the path of his worshipping Lord Vishnu. He gave up the connection of his guru. So, by this process, he begged. But that was not begging, practically that was cheating. But Bali Maharaj agreed to be cheated by the Lord. That is the symptom of a devotee. The devotee agrees to any action of the Lord. When Bali Maharaj saw that the Lord wanted to be cheat by asking 3 feet land, he will take the whole universe. So he agreed. And by 2 feet, the whole universe was covered, up and down. Then Bamandev asked him, where is to keep the 3rd feet? So Bali Maharaj agreed, my Lord, you keep it on my head. I've got my body still. In this way, he purchased Lord Vishnu, Bamandev. And Bamandev remained as the doorkeeper of Bali Maharaj. So, by giving everything, Sarmatma Sapane Bali, he gave everything to Lord. And by that giving up, he purchased the Lord. He remained voluntarily as doorkeeper of Bali Maharaj. So, Chalayasi Vikramane Boli Madhubhuta Bhavana Padanakha Nira Janita Janapa. When Bamandev expanded his leg upwards, by his toe there was a hole in the covering of the universe, and through that hole the Ganges water came from Vaikuntha. Padanakha Nira Janita, and the Ganges water is flowing now in the universe, sanctifying everywhere, wherever the Ganges water is there. Padanakha Nira Janita Janapa. Then next incarnation is Bhrigupati, Parasuram. Parsuram is a Saktavesh avatar. So he 21 times killed the Kshatriyas. So out of Parsuram's fear, all the Kshatriyas, they migrated towards Europe. It is said in the history of Mahabharata. So 21 times he attacked all the Kshatriyas. They are not in order, so he killed them. And there is a big tank in Kurukshetra where all the bloods were reserved. Later on it became water. So Kshatriya Rudhira, in order to pacify the aggrieved earth, he soaked the earth with the blood of the Kshatriyas. Snapayasi payasi samita bhavata vitarasi diksurane dikpatikamaniyam dasamukha mauli baling ramani. The next avatar is Ramchandra. So the Ravan, who had 10 heads, he challenged the Lord, and Lord Ramchandra took up the challenge and killed him. Then Bahusi Bapusi Visade Basanang Jaladabham Palayati Bhiti Milita Jamuna. When Baladev wanted Jamuna to come near him, so she was not coming, therefore with his plough he wanted to bifurcate the earth. And at that time Jamuna submitted and she came near to the Lord. Halayati Bhiti Jamuna. Halayati Bhiti Milita Jamunam. Jamuna was punished by Lord Baladev. Kesavadhita Haladhara Rupa. Haladhara means plough. Haladhara Rupa Jaya Jagadisha. Next, Buddha, Lord Buddha. Nindasi Jagga Vidhi Raha Sthitiya. Lord Buddha defied the Vedic injunction because his mission was to stop animal killing, and in the Vedas, in some of the sacrifices, animal killing is prescribed. So, those are so-called followers of the Vedic rules, they wanted to stop Buddha there in his mission for stopping animal killing. So therefore, when people wanted to give evidence from the Vedas, that in the Vedas there is description, there is sanction of animal killing in sacrifices, why you are stopping? He nindasi, he defied. And because he defied the authority of Vedas, therefore Buddha philosophy was not accepted in India. Nastik, anyone who will deny the authority of the Vedas, he will be called a Nastik, non-believer. Vedas cannot be disrespected. So in this way, Lord Buddha, to save the poor animals, he sometimes defied the injunction of the Veda. Kesavadhita Buddha Sarira Jaya Jagadisha. The next avatar is Kalki avatar. We are awaiting after 400,000 of years from this time. The Kalki avatar will come and he will take a sword on the horseback just like a king. He will simply go on killing all these non-believers, godless creatures. There will be no more preaching. As in other incarnations there is preaching. In Kalki avatar, the population of the whole world will be so much reduced to animalism that there will be no more power to understand what is God or what is spiritualism. And it is already there in the Kali Yuga. It will increase. People will have no power to understand this philosophy, thought consciousness. So at that time there is no other alternative than to kill them all and is ushering another Satyajug. That is the way of our evolution. Gopal Govinda Rama Madhusudana Gopal Govinda Rama Madhusudana